family, we do a lot to save money, and one way that we do save money is we make our own beauty products. I do have another beauty product video which I will link in the description box below for you to watch, but I am going to make soap. So as a disclaimer, I do want to put it out there that you really need to be safe when you make your own soap. You are working with lye. Lye is a heavy and harsh chemical, and you really want to get the best ingredients that you can. Now you can use cheap oils. I believe there is a video on YouTube where you can make soap using oil out of the Dollar Tree. I have done it. It is very good soap. However, for my particular skin conditions, I have very dry skin and I am prone to stress-induced eczema. So I tend to go with a more nourishing, more conditioning soap with a little bit higher quality of oils. Most of the oils that I purchased, I go to ethnic stores. One of the ethnic stores that I go to is an Indian store. They are fantastic for oils, especially bulk, large container oils. Another place that I got some oils, is particularly my Shea Butter, is Essential Depot. You can get any kind of Shea Butter. I believe they do even sell it at Hobby Lobby and Michael's. Also, you do not want your small children around the kitchen, running around underneath your feet while you are making your soap. Also, make sure that your pets are either outside or in their cage, as if you trip, splash anything, the lye will burn them. So you really do want to pay attention and put safety first. So let's get to the rest of making soap. Hi YouTube, this is Al with My Life as a Frugal Wife, and tonight I am making soap. To get started, there's a couple pieces of equipment that you will need to make soap. All you need is just some basic containers, much like this one. I bought this at the hardware store. I think it was like 50 cents or $1 a piece. You can either use old Tupperware. I even have an old yogurt container. I use rubber spatulas that you can find at Dollar Tree. I also use plastic spoons to mix. So you really don't need a lot of fancy schmancy equipment. You just need basic equipment. And you can do it as cheaply as you want or as expensive as you want. But a few key items that you will want to invest in. The first one is a scale. Now this scale I bought off Amazon. It is called Zeta Medic, and it has a tare function and a unit of measure function. Now there are most ingredients that I will measure by ounces, but to get a lot more accurate, such as measuring my lye, I am going to use grams because I want to be as accurate as possible. To protect my scale, I put it inside a Ziploc bag. That way any spills that happen on my scale, I can just easily wipe it off with a damp cloth. The other piece of equipment that you should invest in is a thermometer. This one is laser point. I just point it at anything and it will give me a reading. Now you want to take the temperature of your soaping because there is a specific range in which you can get a really good emulsification of your soaps. Otherwise, it'll get to be very hard to work with, which I will explain later on. The other piece of equipment that you are going to need, and you don't really have to spend a lot of money, is goggles and a face mask. Now we are working with lye. Lye is a chemical that can severely burn you. Now there is no lye in the end product of soap. However, it is in the beginning stages of soap. The process of soap making is called saponification, and it is a process and chemical reaction that the soap will go through in order to get from separate ingredients to an emulsified solid bar of soap. So we use the glasses to avoid any splatter while we are mixing our lye, as well as a face mask, because when lye meets water, it can emit vapors and steam. When you mix water and lye together, at least when I make soap, it gets up to 212 degrees. And at least for the first 2 minutes to a little over 2 minutes, it's going to release steam and vapor, and they are pretty pungent. So just to be on the safe side and protect your eyes and protect your lungs, you will want a face mask and goggles. Now, I bought these together at Lowe's. They came in a 2-pack together, and I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was around $4.99. Now, the most important thing that you will need, and it can be as cheap or as expensive as you want, is a stick blender. I bought this one at Kohl's. It was $19.99. But I do find that if you are going to get into the art of soap making, invest in a little bit more expensive stick blender than paying $20. I have paid $20 for both of my stick blenders. I have had 2, and this is the second one I have gone through in a year. So definitely you want to invest in a good stick blender. You also want to protect your hands because, as I said, lye can burn, so we are going to use plastic gloves. Lastly, you want a glass Pyrex mixing bowl or a good glass bowl to mix your lye in. I do know of people who do use plastic. That's fine. Just make sure it's not flimsy. But I really like the glass because then I get the security of knowing that while I am mixing my lye, as hot as the lye can get, it is not going to melt through the glass. So I have an 8-cup Pyrex measuring bowl, and it is perfect for at least one loaf of soap. So to get started, I am going to show you how I would measure my oils. Now, you are going to follow this same process through any oil that you use for this recipe or other recipes, and you would follow the same process and the same procedure of measuring. You do want to be as accurate and on point as possible with your measurements, as it can affect your end result. So my first oil that I am going to measure is my coconut oil. Now, coconut oil, because it is at room temperature, isn't always solid and it isn't always liquid. It really, really depends. So mine is liquid. I am going to have to warm it up in the microwave so that it will solidify, be not solid. You want it to be liquid because it's a lot easier to work with and mix. So we are going to tear out our scale, which is setting the measurement to 0. You add your container. It shows that it is 1.1. Tear it again and bring it back to 0. That way, when you're measuring your oils, you're not going to include the weight of the container that the oils are in. You want just the oil. Get yet another container. Tear it, bring it back to 0, so we're not measuring the weight of the container, and you're going to add your additional oils. And I have many of these, so I am going to go through and I am going to measure out all my oil and all my additives, and we'll be right back. All right, folks, so we are back. I have all of my ingredients measured, all of my oils, which you can see here, as well as my lye and my water. Now, I am going to put on some gloves and my facial mask as well as my goggles, because you do want to ensure that you are being very, very safe when you are handling chemicals. Now, the end product will be chemical free. However, to start with, we are working with a chemical. So make sure that you put your safety goggles on and your safety mask. All right, so we are going to move the scale out of the way. And we, just for the sake of this getting really, really hot, we're gonna place a pad underneath it. And we are going to add our lye mixture. Now this is distilled water. I will put all the measurements for everything that I am using in the description box below so that you can make the same recipe that I am making. Now you do not want to use tap water for this. You do want to use distilled water. You want no other additives in your water that could potentially affect your final product. So I have a little over 12 ounces of water, about 125.14 grams of lye. And I am going to stir this slowly. You want to add your lye to your water, never your water to your lye. Otherwise, it could splash up in your face. It could potentially explode. It will get awful nasty. I don't know if you can see this on the camera, folks, but there is steam coming up. You do not want to breathe that in. Stir your lye mixture very carefully until the water runs clear. And then we are going to wait until the lye mixture comes down to about 90 to 100 degrees. I usually soap, or what they call soap. It's a phrase that we soapers use. I will start soaping at about almost 100. That's kind of my sweet spot. And what that means is sometimes when you add additives or fragrance oils, or you combine your oils, different temperatures have different reactions. Your soap may get thick at a lower temperature. It may be a lot thinner at a higher temperature, or vice versa. And it has since stopped steaming, so I am gonna stop. I'm gonna stop stirring. Now we are going to take the temperature of the water. Folks, it is 167 degrees. This is why we wear gloves and a facial mask and safety goggles. It is hot. So we are gonna wait until this comes down to 100 degrees. I'm gonna stir every so often just to make sure that there's no granules left at the bottom. I am also going to ensure that I can get it as cool as quickly as possible, because otherwise you'll be here all night. And then we will come back and we'll start mixing our oils. All right, guys, we're back, and my lime mixture is relatively cool. It's about 101. So I am gonna go ahead and start adding my oils. So I'm gonna add the heaviest first, which is olive oil. And I usually stick my spoon in here and put it down the shaft against the side of the plate. I'm sorry, the side of the bowl. That way it doesn't splash up back at me and I don't lose anything. And you always want to scrape and get every last detail, because remember, this is measured. Next, I'm going to do coconut oil. I'm going to do grapeseed oil. We're going to do our shea butter. Shea butter is exceptional for dry skin issues. So isn't cocoa butter. Any of your butters, mango butter, shea butter, cocoa butter, are excellent in soap. But you can't add too much though. And I have almond oil. Actually, I think this is avocado oil. And then we have almond oil. All of our oils are mixed. I'm just going to give this a stir. And you can see how it's changing color. It is becoming more of an olive oily cream color. And that is because all of the oils are mixing. Now you do want to make sure that all of your oils, especially if you're using a microwave, are all relatively the same temperature as your lye water. Otherwise, it can cause problems. So I am going to take the bottom of my stick blender, mix it just a little bit. You want to tap the bottom so that you take out all the air bubbles that are between the blades and the bottom of your glass. And you want to just attach your stick blender, and here we go. We are going to bring this mixture up to a trace. And what that means is you're going to stick blend and stir and mix until you lift this up and you draw a figure 8 on the top of your soap, and it almost sits on top of the soap. It doesn't drip like water. It drips like a thick consistency to where the figure 8 stays on the surface of the soap, and that is called trace. I tend to do mine at medium trace. Some soapers choose to do light trace. It's a little bit more liquidy, especially if you're gonna venture into your swirls and your patterns, things of that nature. I am very simple. I really could care less about patterns. I just need a soap that works. So I bring mine to a medium trace, high trace, somewhere in the middle, to where you do see that figure 8 on the very top. So let's get blending. And this is emulsifying all of your oils together so that they do not separate. Almost like making mayonnaise, if you will. You don't want the mayonnaise or the salad dressing to separate. It's kind of the same concept. And as you can see, this is getting just a little bit thicker. Now this consistency, if I was to compare it, is probably the same consistency when you're making chocolate pudding before it goes in the fridge, kind of that consistency. Sorry for the loud noise, folks. Now we are going to add our additives. Now I like to use oatmeal, and that's exactly what I'm using in this recipe. I am going to use 1 tablespoon, or teaspoon rather, of oatmeal, probably just a little bit more. Now oatmeal is very soothing on the skin, especially if your skin is really dry. So because I don't want this soap to be a drying soap, I'm gonna use very little of the oatmeal because oatmeal absorbs moisture, and what I'm looking for is to put moisture back in the skin. So the butters and the oils that I've used are very moisturizing and conditioning. However, with the oatmeal, it's gonna be very soothing, almost healing, if you will. Now I just took my bullet, I have a bullet glass here, and I just put a little bit of oatmeal in my bullet, and I made a powder consistency. Now I'm just gonna do a heaping teaspoon, 1 teaspoon of the oatmeal. Now I'm gonna put my stick blender over the oatmeal so that I can blend it really good and there's no chunks. All right. Now we're gonna add our fragrance oil, our essential oils. I do not use fragrance oil. This is my personal opinion only. I am not downing anyone who does use fragrance oil. They make beautiful, beautiful soaps and they smell really, really good. However, fragrance oil can be chemical based and lab created. So I personally choose not to go that route, and I spend a little bit more money and go with a good, pure, therapeutic essential oil. Fragrance oil is the cheaper route. Essential oils, especially for the amount that you use, I'm using 1 ounce, which is 2 of your small bottles. The small bottles are probably about that big, and they're 0.5 ounces each. So you're gonna need 2 of them. And unless you buy bulk, it can get a little pricey. But you can go to any of your soap shops, Essential Depot, Nurture Soaps. There's a couple other online soaping companies that do sell fragrance oils. I have heard really good things about them. For me personally, I don't care for fragrance oil. I use essential oils only. I do use essential oils as far as my aromatherapy goes, so I use them anyways. I always have them on hand. So for me, it's not really an added expense. But I have 1 ounce of French lavender essential oil. Now you can use regular lavender, but I tend to like the French a little bit better. It is a little bit more pungent. Some essential oils will thicken your soap a lot more rapidly than others. Really depends on what fragrance you're using. And we're gonna give it 1 more final blend. So I'm going to show you what trace looks like. That way, pardon the bad camera angle, but you see how it leaves that line on the top of your soap. You can see it, it doesn't necessarily sink. That is what they call trace. This is when you know your soap is ready to pour. So we are going to pour our soap. Disconnect your stick blender. I'm gonna get all that goodness off. I don't waste anything. All right, give it a couple more stirs. And we are ready to mold. Now, as far as molds go, you can really use anything. You can use a regular soap mold, like the one I have here. These are a little bit expensive. I believe I paid, I wanna say $7.99. Maybe a little bit more for my soap mold. And what they are is they are silicone inserts inside a wooden mold. So it's 2 pieces. And I have seen people use Pringles containers. I've seen them use iced tea containers. You can use an old cereal box. You can even make your own out of wood and just line it with parchment paper. Anything will do as long as it is sturdy enough to hold your mold. Now, I prefer these wooden molds just because I make a lot of soap. I believe I have about 5 of these. But this will hold 32 ounces of oils. This is what all of my oils equal up to, is 32 ounces. And I will get, depending on the cut, you will get either 8 to 10 bars out of this soap, or if you cut them smaller, at about 3/4 of an inch, I can get up to maybe 18 bars of soap, which is quite a lot. So I like the thicker bars of soap. I just think they last longer. So we are going to pour our soap. Now you can do a lot of different designs. I don't really get into designing. I just want plain soap. And make sure that you scrape your entire bowl. And of course I make a mess. You just want to make sure that you have it nice and level. Tap down to get any air bubbles out. And then we are just going to use a clean rag and go around the very edge. And you can use a napkin for this. I just don't buy paper towels in my house, so I use rags. And that's it. So we are going to wait for this to set up just a little bit, and then we are going to create a design on top. I call it texturing. I do like to texture my soap, make it look pretty. Then you're more apt to use it, right? So I'm going to let this sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'll come back and show you how I do that. All right, so now that my soap has cooled just a bit, it's set up relatively nicely, I am going to texture the top, and I am going to add some actual oatmeal, which is unground, on the top just for texture. It really doesn't do anything, it's just to make it pretty, as I will be actually giving this away as a gift. So we are just going to take a spoon, and you are going to start at one end and you're going to push up. And you're going to let it fall off the side of the spoon. And it doesn't have to be an exact science. So I'm just going to go back. I tend to do one side. Not everybody likes it, but that's okay. And I'm just gonna push, because I don't want any over the edge. Otherwise, it'll just look funky when I cut it. And it's very forgiving, especially when it's this liquid still. It's almost like a thick pudding. There we go. And you can see it is textured. Not an exact science, it really isn't. When I cut it, it's gonna look really, really pretty. I will not be able to cut this until tomorrow. It does take 24 hours to be able to cut it, just so it can go through its own saponification process. That is all the chemical reactions that are going to go in here within that 24-hour period. That is going to give you your hard bar soap. So I will have to wait 24 hours to cut this, maybe even a little bit longer. So tomorrow night I will be posting a final video on the soap showing you how I cut it and what the final product looks like. So I am going to, just over the very top, I am going to put my oatmeal. And you don't need a lot. Like I said, it's just to make it a little bit more eye-catching, I guess. And what I do and highly recommend is I take a 90% rubbing alcohol or some witch hazel and spray the top. This is going to prevent a white ash from forming on the very top of your soap as it dries. They call that soda ash. I'm not really up on the technical terminology or why it even happens. I just know that it will almost be like someone dusted the top of your soap with baby powder. So this just prevents that from happening. And just a few squirts will do you. And here is our final soap. And it will sit until tomorrow when I will be able to cut it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you learned how to make your own chemical-free soap using essential oils and natural products. I will leave all of the measurements for my oils down in the description box below, as well as where I got my thermometer and my my scale, as those two you can get on Amazon. I will try and also find the link for this mold as well, and the link for the Essential Oil Depot, or the Essential Depot's Shea Butter, because I do buy it by the block. So I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Go out and try and make your family some soap. I did the money calculations on this soap and all of the oils and shea butter that I used. This entire soap costs me $15.73. Now, if you get 10 bars of soap out of that, you're paying less than $1.50, if not a little bit, a couple cents more, $1.50 per bar of soap, and that you have made yourself and not purchased in a store. And it smells amazing. My entire house smells like lavender. So I hope you give this a try. If you have any questions for me, please put them in the comments below, and I will be sure to answer your questions.